Today in America, we are witnessing a monumental moment. Trump isn't even hiding his plan anymore. Deploying the National Guard into DC, trying to rig elections through redistricting mid-decade, or doing away with mail-in ballots or even voting machines. This is the blueprint of an authoritarian takeover, and I know you all know that already. But his base of largely Christians, they don't seem to mind what he's doing at all. And I have found this to be a little bit surprising. Why does it feel like so many Christians, specifically conservative evangelicals, seem to see this authoritarian takeover as a good thing? Instead of seeing it as assured destruction of the country, they seem to see it as something like salvation. I used to think that Trump exposing his authoritarian plan in plain sight would make the Christians that follow him want to turn away from him. Kind of like how Epstein has been this continual upheaval of his base actually turning against him on a particular issue that they don't agree with. But instead, this seems to be well within the plan that they already wanted. I believe that this group of people who claim Christian views that are leading to this set of beliefs have a deeper belief system beneath what they think they're reading in the Bible. But here's the thing. This belief system is nothing new. It has a name and it has shaped cultures before. One I think you'll particularly be interested in. But if we want to stop history from repeating itself, we need to expose this belief system, understand how it works, how it justifies hate, and why so many people are so captivated by it. Because if we don't, we might be heading straight back into 1930s Germany, the very society that was particularly influenced by this very belief system. Let's get into it. The belief system that we're talking about is the answer to probably the most fundamentally important question that human beings ever ask. Why do we do the things that we do? I'm talking about human nature and motivation. This is a question that has been long debated through the realms of psychology and business and religion and is reflected widely across media. But it's the way you answer this question that's so critically important for how you live your life. It's going to impact the way you treat other people, the way you communicate with others, and the way you even see yourself. When I was in grad school studying leadership, I learned something very simple but profound. If you don't understand what motivates people, you're not going to get very far in trying to lead them. But here's the thing. What it is you believe motivates people is going to fundamentally alter your leadership style. In management theory, this debate boils down to two competing theories, Theory X and Theory Y. And depending on which model a leader embraces, entire cultures are impacted. We're talking about governments and societies and big business and small business. It's all radically transformed depending on how you answer this question. Theory X is the old school model. It's a top-down, rigid structure of hierarchy. It's where you're going to get a lot of bureaucracy in a business, and it's based on the fundamental idea that people are lazy unless otherwise forced not to be. They don't want to work. So you need to put really strict guardrails in place to control them so that they have to work. You need to reward them and punish them depending on what they do and don't do so that they continue producing. Otherwise, they would just never do anything at all. This is the mindset that fueled the Industrial Revolution in America. For a long time, it dominated business, partly because it's such an easy concept for a leader to adopt. All they have to do is force down edicts to their people who they believe need that type of control in order to do anything. It's the belief among leaders that if they don't enact that amount of control, their people will just go crazy and nothing will ever get done. So they're actually caring for their company and caring for the lives of these people. But in the early 60s, an MIT professor named Douglas McGregor put forth a different theory, Theory Y. And his theory was fundamentally opposed to Theory X. It assumes that people are good, that they want to work, that they want to be a contributing member of society, and what they really need from a leader is absolutely different than what Theory X proposes. In theory Y, which is much harder for a leader to actually do, they need to cultivate an environment of safety and security with aspects of encouraging people toward shared goals. Under theory Y, if you want to get great work out of your people, you need to actually invest in them as human beings. And while this style of leadership takes a lot more work from the leaders, it has grown in popularity ever since the early 60s because of one reason. Workers want to be in an environment where they are respected, encouraged, and believed in. Workers need to feel like they're safe to try and fail in order to innovate and evolve. So what does this have to do with evangelicals? Well, kind of everything. Because when you come down to it, you could split Christian ideologies among that same fault line. One side of Christianity believes people are fundamentally lazy and bad and wouldn't ever make good choices unless forced to do so. And the other group believes that people are inherently good and worthy and need encouragement in order to succeed and grow. In the conservative evangelical mindset of Christianity, people can't be trusted. They will always choose the easy way out and just keep on sinning and ruining their lives unless being controlled out of it. But they don't present it as control, they present it as protection. And if you think about the logical progression that underlying belief leads to, all of a sudden, all kinds of positions that never made any sense to me start to make a whole lot of sense. Why women need men as this protective layer over them, and why people need leaders as this protective layer over them, people to think for them and to interpret for them what they're supposed to believe and do with their life. Children are in harm's way because they couldn't possibly know how to discern good from evil in public schools, even when you're cramming down their throat every day at home what they should think and believe. They still can't be trusted to make good decisions. And even men who do things like essaying other people can't really be held responsible because at the end of the day, they're not capable of making good decisions on their own. They get a free pass. This underlying belief is the reason why I think we see such a lack of critical thinking skills among this group of individuals, because they're literally taught they can't trust their own thoughts. They can't trust their own thinking skills. How are they supposed to learn and develop and nurture their critical thinking abilities? All they know how to do is parrot things they've been told, because that's what's safe to them. That's how they stay protected. And so if you're a person who truly believes this world is evil and bad and on its way to hell, and you truly believe that we need this control-laden protection in order to be saved, the conclusion is simple. An authoritarian government is the path to salvation. And that is scary stuff. When I was learning about Theory X and Theory Y in grad school, I remember thinking at the time, gee, Theory X sounds oddly religious. I wonder who came up with these ideas and whether they were religiously motivated. I was actually shocked to find out how right I was, and I was not prepared for the rabbit hole that this was going to lead down, and so I just have to share this story with you. One of the most influential voices in the Theory X model is none other than a man named Max Weber, who lived in pre-Nazi Germany. The work of Weber radically impacted the culture of Germany right on the eve of the rise of Hitler. And it far surpassed the influence of someone like Karl Marx on the society for how it made people feel that they should view politics. Among academics, Weber is seen as one of the founders of sociology, and most importantly, a theorist of capitalism. But his ideas were deeply shaped by his growing up life. He had a Calvinistic mother and a very authoritarian, domineering father. And the conflict between their very entrenched and competing ideologies was deeply emotionally and mentally wounding to Weber. While he, on one hand, produced groundbreaking work, on the other hand, he spent years of his life incapacitated, in and out of institutions, and barely able to function. But early on in his life, he started to notice a pattern within himself. On the one hand, he struggled to get up in the morning, achieve anything, but on the other hand, he was able to force himself to be disciplined enough to actually eventually get out of that rut and be successful. And what he felt he had learned from this was that he's inherently lazy, but because of his ability to be disciplined and force himself to be productive, he's still able to. And the story he told himself in this became his life story. In fact, it became the lens through which he viewed society. He saw himself as lazy, as needing this force of discipline in order to be capable of doing anything. Instead of seeing himself as the product of childhood trauma, as someone who was forever marked by the extreme positions spewed out toward him by both his mother and his father, he saw himself as the problem, internalizing their voices throughout his entire life, believing himself to be so lazy and worthless that he could barely accomplish anything. And yet, those little scraps of what he was able to accomplish ended up being some of the most groundbreaking, brilliant work of his time. Weber's life is a case study in what happens under Theory X. He embodied this belief that people are lazy and must be forced into discipline. But just imagine how different his life would have been if he had encountered Theory Y. Leadership that saw him not as lazy or foolish, but as a brilliant, curious mind trapped by shame. Someone who would have offered him encouragement instead of judgment, support instead of pressure. How drastically different could his life have been, and ultimately a society that rose up in part as a product of his belief system? And that's the tragedy. Conservative evangelicals in America today are living out this same broken cycle because they grow up with authoritarian parents and puritanical parents. They too believe that their childhood trauma is in fact their own laziness, reinforcing this belief that people are inherently lazy, and without that protection, i.e. control, they'll go off the rails. And when they see a world that doesn't align with their values, they believe that that world is off the rails and therefore needs the same protection that they themselves have had. And this is why understanding these dueling theories of humanity matters. Because until we recognize the worldviews beneath the politics, we're always going to judge and dismiss and disregard what other people are saying instead of understanding why they think the things that they think in the first place. After all, as Max Weber shows us, those who cannot learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Let me know what you think, and as always, stay curious.